Hey everybody, it's Stephen Brooke and welcome to Architectural Photography and Composition. First, I want to thank all of you for your emails. I really appreciate hearing from you, letting me know that the videos are helping you with your work, helping organize your work out in the fields. I'm hearing from everybody from professionals to people just starting out. If you'd like to support the site, consider purchasing a copy of my architectural photography ebook. You can get it at stephenbrookphotography.com. It's a great companion to the videos. It's a wonderful reference you can go back to. Any of the pages are printable, including the workflows, plus there are a lot of extras. In previous videos, we've talked about how important proportional systems are to organize your picture plane and how valuable it is to look at them and try to commit some of them to memory to practice seeing them so that when you're out in the field it can make your work go quicker. And one of the videos is practice seeing proportions with Photoshop grid guides, and I show you in that video how to make a grid guide in Photoshop if you don't know, and how to set it up to practice various proportional systems. And in my video on Philip Johnson's Glass House, hope you get a chance to see it if you haven't already, I talk about how I use a 2x3 proportional system throughout to kind of match the proportional system that Mr. Johnson used in constructing his building. Now, here's something that struck me. When you're learning guitar, one of the things you do is you learn basic chord shapes. Sometimes you don't even know what the notes are, but you learn chord shapes that you can then move up and down the neck of the guitar. And the same thing in piano, you learn basic shapes to chords, to triads. You know that a major triad looks like this, a minor looks like that, a seventh chord looks like that, and you practice those up and down the keyboard. And learning the shapes is a visual memory, a muscle memory, so that you can move more quickly as you learn how to play the various instruments. And for example, here's a D minor seventh, a chordal shape. This is what Bill Evans uses in Kind of Blue. And you learn these shapes and they help you in playing the music. So there are common shapes in the history of art. Two in particular, the pyramidal shape, which is used for portraiture. Here's John Malase's Lily Langtree. And if you look at Raphael's Madonnas, you'll see that almost all of these fall into a pyramidal shape, a shape that an artist will lay out ahead of time and then construct the image within that. Same thing with circular shape, mandalas, medallions. Here's one of mine, a photomicrograph that I put together within this circular shape. Albrecht Dürer did a series of knots. This is the sixth knot. And you can see that this is all a circular shape. And this was very common, very popular in medieval times, where they would use a compass to make circles within circles. And then you would put your artwork within that framework. And so I thought, wouldn't it be good if we had a series of shapes for architectural photography, so that along with your study of proportional systems, you had yet another way to organize the information that's out in front of you as you go into the field, so that you don't just suddenly go out and go, oh, what am I supposed to do? You have some shapes that you've memorized. You can see whether or not your project falls into one of those shapes. That, with your proportional system, will give you a leg up on getting started. So let's look at these 6 shapes. The first one, axial symmetrical. And by axial, of course, I mean that the horizontals are parallel to the picture plane, including the building, of course, and that the building itself is in the very center of the frame. Now, is it going to be perfectly symmetrical? No. If material to the left and right of your building are different, then it's not going to be bilaterally symmetrical like in biology. But the building itself, the center of the building, is going to be right down the middle of the page. And here's an example where I'm going to use a lot of Piranesi because he does this, some engravings of Rome. And you can see that here at St. Peter's, and here's the Trevi Fountain, and you can see that in this case, these three cases, Piranesi has put his main subject matter right in the middle. And what this does psychologically is it ennobles the image that you're rendering. Now, we've talked about how important it is usually to not put a main element in the middle. Now that's very important, as we'll see. If you're doing a building and you're shooting it off axis, there's the corner of the building and you don't want to put the corner in the middle. This is a different situation. And so where might this be of value? Well, if you're photographing a church, for example, a dynamic composition, an asymmetrical composition, you're training your viewer's eye to move around the image. But in an axial, symmetrical picture, you want your viewer to look dead center and to hold their image right there. And it's perfect for churches. Here are two, one at EUR, for buildings that have a certain kind of monumentality, and you want to reinforce that monumentality by putting them dead center, making them the absolute star of your shot, just like the head is the star of an image in a portrait. Same thing, you can do that with an interior. If you want to emphasize the layout of this church as all the members in the congregation are looking in the direction of the altar, put that altar right in the middle, have a perfectly symmetrical image, and you reinforce that sense of monumentality. Here are two more. I did this at the New York Public Library because this is a truly remarkable interior done by Carrere and Hastings. And there's another residential interior. Again, the building is dead center, even though the trees are not symmetrical, but the building itself is right in the middle. Now, I used this technique on purpose when I photographed those little cottages at Seaside. A very brief history. The people from that area, when Robert Davis started building Seaside and started building these little cottages, they thought, why are they building these crappy little shacks? Well, they weren't. They were beautifully designed, beautifully proportioned, and very well made. And to emphasize that, I shot every one of these little cottages on axis, dead center, so that I ennobled them as if I were ennobling a grand church. Now, it was very effective. The second shape is an axial composition, but the main building is now off-center. Not turn, off-center. So the center of the building is now somewhere over here, not here. So Piranesi does this in a number of his images. Here, note that the building is on axis, but the center of the building is over here. Here's Canaletto. His main building is here. Center of the building is here. Now, why would he do that? Well, unlike these images, he's also wanting you to see what else is around there. And by offsetting his main building, he can see the other things that are around there. So here's an example of how I've done that myself. This is my main building, but I want to show these other buildings at Seaside. So I'm on axis, but the middle of my building is way off center. Same thing here in San Sebastiano. I don't want to just show this. I want to show the gateway, which is off to the side. Here at the Brightline Station in Fort Lauderdale, here's the middle of my picture here, but the middle of the main part of my photograph is off center because I want to also emphasize what's going on here. Now, unlike my really dramatic axial symmetrical picture of the interior at Palmer Trinity, I moved this one off to the side to emphasize the architecture here a little bit more and to give you a bit more dynamism to how you view the interior of the church. Rather than going straight down the middle, I've moved you in this way, turned you this way. These elements are turning you this way, and again, my vertical elements are holding you in. Now, the third shape is the same thing, axial symmetrical, but with a vertical. And we saw this in Claude Lorraine's painting, where he has the architecture here. He has a vertical on the side, and what happens with the vertical is the vertical and the foreground, particularly if the foreground is in shadow, makes this little L shape which frames your architecture. It's a very effective way of doing a frame within a frame. Piranesi does it here with the Pantheon. Notice he's on axis. The middle of the Pantheon is over here. You see some of the buildings start to move this way, and here's his vertical here to hold your eye in. De Chirico, even with his exaggerated perspective, here's his building. He's on axis here. Here's the middle, and he's got this big vertical to hold you in. Same thing with Canaletto. Here's his main building way back here on axis. Here's the middle of the building. Here's a big vertical over here to hold your eye in. And I've done this in a number of ways, again, to try to make this little L shape to support my architecture. Here's Keenel and Elliott's El Jardin, Philip Johnson's Glass House. Here's Suzanne Martinson's Greenberg residence, and this little L shape is particularly strong if you have the foreground in shadow as well. And then here's the Fortuna Virilis in Rome. I'm on axis, the center of the building is over here, my vertical goes like this, and it in combination with the foreground frames my little building. Now if you want to take a deeper dive into how to use verticals, what the French call repertoire elements, in your architectural photographs, take a look at this video that I have called Vertical Power, using the compositional strength of border verticals in architectural photographs. And I go into this in a variety of ways for both interiors, exteriors, and gardens. So if you haven't seen it, go over there and have a look. Here is the first one where we are off axis. By that I mean the building, the horizontals of the building are off axis. It's asymmetrical, it's moved off the center. Two facades and no vertical. Note again that the corner of the building is not in the middle. And we talked about where do you put the corner of the building? That's where you use proportional systems. If you use a rule of thirds, a third of the way in. If you do a 2x5 composition, maybe 2/5 of the way in or 3/5 of the way in, whatever works for your composition, but not in the middle, because that sends your eye in two directions. So again, Piranesi, here's two facades, off axis, no big, the little vertical, but no really big vertical. Same thing here. Now there's a little bit on axis way in the back here, but when I say off axis, I mean the building that you're photographing, the main building. Same thing here. You see a little bit of the side of the entrance. Here's the full facade, but again, no vertical over here in Ponte Maggiore. So I've done this. Here's Machado Silvetti's building at Seaside. Two facades, asymmetric, off axis, but no vertical. And in order to make these work, again, I've shown you here, this is a 2x3 proportional system, so that this, because it's off axis and you don't have the stability of an axial composition, you need to use the proportional system to give order to your composition. Otherwise, it's pretty random and your viewer's eye isn't as comfortable looking at your image. Now, this is Streetscape number 1, and that is where you use what we've had before: off-axis, asymmetrical, two facades, and a balancing border vertical. The border vertical is here to counterbalance the direction of this off-axis diagonal. So here we see Piranesi using it here, a real streetscape, two facades, off-axis, and here's his vertical to balance the thrust of these diagonals. Same thing here. He's got a little one over here, but this is off-axis, two facades going in this direction, and he's got an obelisk here, and a column here, and he's got another vertical over here. So I use this all the time. Here I'm off axis, two facades, big vertical. Same thing here, same thing here, same thing here. And by the way, for the record, this particular shape works better if you don't use a wide angle lens, because if you use a really super wide angle lens, this tends to get really kind of out of proportion and a bit bizarre looking. So if you can back up, let's say, and shoot something with a 35 or at a 45 millimeter or 55 millimeter focal length, rather than getting right up on top and shooting it with a 17 or 24, you will get a better looking image. It will not be as distorted. But again, 2 facades off axis with a main vertical. Here's some examples again in Rome. Again, if you look at all 6 of these, it's a shape that I use. And that shape is 2 facades off axis, big vertical. You see it here all the time. And the vertical is to lend stability and to give you some relief from that hard diagonal. Now, this is really extreme with the Stazione Termini, and they did that on purpose because of the kind of building it was. But here's this big vertical, and notice underneath here the foreground and shadow, so I'm making this L shape to support my building. This is maybe the most popular one, or the most commonly used, and that's the streetscape shape number 2. The main facade is off axis, 1 facade asymmetrical, and a border vertical, often almost always in full height. Here's Piranesi using it. 1 facade, no 2 facades. Here's his full height vertical. Even on the interior, here's his main facade, here's his vertical over here holding it together. Here's Canaletto, same thing. Again, I want you to see these as shapes, because that's how I would like you to memorize them, that you have these 6 kind of shapes that you can go to when you look in the field. And I have a video, one of the early ones, that said an easy way to improve your architectural photography and your decision making is that when you stand looking, waiting for a light, or just now you can put one of these shapes out in front of you and say, well, is this would I do this as an axial? Would I do this as a streetscape number 1? If you have these 6 shapes in your mind, it makes it easy to just implant them on the view that's out in front of you. So here, streetscape number 2. Here, this is a tighter view, but nonetheless, this is like basically one elevation. Here's a little bit of axial back here and a big vertical holding this together. Interior, same thing. Restaurant, here's this one run of a facade, and here's this vertical to hold it together. Now, you can also use this streetscape in landscape, and it's basically the same shape. You have what would be your 1 facade this way, and here's your big vertical. Easier to see maybe here. Here's your streetscape with a big vertical. And here my son, one of his landscapes from Ohio, he basically deals with the trees as if it's a facade. He's got his big full height vertical, and then he's got part of his river here in shadow making this L shape. These are 6 basic shapes to architectural photographs. Now, are there more? Sure, there are more. Can these be amended? Sure, they can be amended. Just like chords on a guitar or shapes of chords on a piano. Yes, there are infinite numbers of varieties. But I think as a place to start, particularly if you're new to this field, along with studying proportional systems, having these shapes within your visual vocabulary, I think is going to help you a lot. So don't forget, check out StephenBrookPhotography.com to purchase a copy of my architectural photography ebook. Please let me know how you're enjoying the videos. If you like them, please give them a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel or you've seen videos and haven't subscribed, please subscribe so that you know when new ones are coming up. Share them with your friends. We'd like to have more people involved. And thank you again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.